Hi, guys. This is a really short one. We're talking about the Allied invasion of Europe, which many people know as D-Day, or maybe even storming the beaches of Normandy. As you know, Normandy is an area in France. We use states, they use provinces, and it's called Normandy is the area. Um, One of the things that's really most important is that most of the leaders of the Axis powers, Germany, Japan, and Italy, they realized that in order for them to win the war, they needed a quick victory. The United States was involved. We already talked about the manufacturing power the other day. And how production would win the war, the massive amount of goods being produced by the United States, plus the infusion of fresh troops and supplies. Now, the Axis believed that the USA, if they were met with early defeats, the USA would lose its will to fight and drop out of the war. Now, this is interesting because, as you obviously know, with Pearl Harbor, that was a pretty big defeat, and we certainly did not, lose the will to fight. And early in the Pacific campaign, there was many losses for the United States early on, and still we continue to fight. It's not really clear why the Germans and the Japanese and the Italians, why they assessed the United States would just sort of, give up. It probably goes to their perception that the United States did not want to be in the war in the first place, that they were isolationist, and that being involved in Europe's business wouldn't be worth it. But that was a very poor judgment by the Axis powers that it turned out not to be true. Now, Hitler felt that the racial ethnic diversity of the United States was actually a weakness, and that would lead to the downfall of the United States. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth in that regard. Now, there were tensions between the Allies, and the main tension was that the Soviet Union and Joseph Stalin wanted to press for an opening of a Western front, meaning that the Allies would attack Germany from the west, invading France and attack Germany from the west, and that way the Allies would draw some of the German troops away from the Eastern Front, where they were battling the Soviets, and the Soviets were just getting just annihilated. I mean, the amount of troops they lost is really hard to believe. And that was a real source of tension. Stalin was very bitter about that, very angry with the U.S. and the British in particular, that they were not doing more to ease the pressure on the Soviet Union. Now, of course, on the other hand, Churchill was probably pretty ticked off that Stalin had made a peace agreement with Hitler in the first place, and he kind of said, "Look, man, we're not going to go out of our way to help you since you're the one that was bros with Hitler for a while. That's pretty messed up." Well, eventually, finally, the Allies agreed to launch an invasion of Europe through France, opening that western front, and they called it Operation Overlord. And it was launched from Britain, and it was a cross-channel invasion of France. And you can see kind of right here, this is Britain, there's France, that's the English Channel. So it really was not a large body of water to traverse. So the invasion of Europe, D-Day, as it comes to be known, June 6, 1944, about 140,000 Allied troops landed on or behind the beaches, and they were parachuted in or airdropped in the night before, to be prepared for, or some were airdropped in the night before to sort of help be behind enemy lines. But many, the vast majority landed on the beaches. There was a parachuted in the night before. General Dwight David Eisenhower was in charge of the entire operation. Of course, he goes on to become president. And it actually went, fairly well. And we talk about war going well. It doesn't mean. I mean, there's. Let me put it this way: there's still a lot of suffering, a lot of death, a lot of destruction. So when you say a war goes well, everything is relative, of course, meaning that it's going better than it could have gone. I don't think anyone really likes war because inevitably there's death and all sorts of destruction. But that being said, things were going as well, almost as well as could be hoped for the Allies. And by September, the Allies had reached into Germany, And the Germans, in a really sort of all-out counterattack, the Germans pushed back the Allied advances by counterattacking in Belgium, and this created was known as a bulge in the advancing Allied lines. And I guess you can kind of see it, in this area right here. Um, it's known as the Battle of the Bulge, and this was a last ditch effort from Germany to really try to say, hey, if we can, push through and attack and get into the Allied lines and disrupt their supplies, we have a chance to win the war. Was that true? Probably not. Regardless of how the Battle of the Bulge ended, Germany was going to lose. The victory in the Battle of the Bulge certainly accelerated that effort for Germany's surrender. And really, after the Battle of the Bulge, it was all but over for Germany. They had zero chance of getting a victory at that point. Um, another thing that is people sort of discuss whether or not this was necessary or not. There was, along with obviously the advance of Allied ground troops, there was massive, massive amounts of Allied bombs fell on German cities, and ostensibly, meaning in appearance, they were to destroy German manufacturing abilities, and many of these towns were bombed, were in fact manufacturing facilities, but also many historic cities, such as Dresden, which really is in eastern Germany, but it you know at one point, I mean, people might have referred to it as the Paris of Eastern Europe. It was a very, very culturally relevant city, lots and lots of history, and they were literally almost completely destroyed. Thousands and thousands of civilians were killed, and a lot of people are left to wonder, if this was necessary to win the war. And I guess we will look at that same question when it comes to Japan and whether or not it was necessary to use nuclear weapons to win the war with Japan. Thank you very much. That's it.